Hello, everyone. Welcome to Medium Day. My name is Savio P. Clemente. I'm a journalist. I'm a board certified wellness coach. I'm an author, and I'm also a podcaster. And today, I actually wanted to do a roundtable discussion with a few panelists on the importance of connecting with your inner self regarding well-being. So, besides all those titles that I mentioned, I'm also a stage 3 cancer survivor. So, cancer entered my life in July of 2014. Fortunately, through a whole bunch of scenarios and ups and downs, I am still in remission. I've been in remission. This December will be about 9 years. And, I write for a few publications, and the one that I always love writing for is Authority Magazine, which is Medium's largest and most dynamic publication. I have at this point 7 interview series running, starting from I Survived Cancer, Here Is How I Did It. Also, I've interviewed about 60 to 70 doctors in the area of oncology and hematology. I've done a series on resilience, rising to resilience. I've done one on the fear of failure. I've done one on how to believe in yourself. And really, all of those interview series is really about allowing people to touch within what's happening with them, like what's going on in your life that's not so external, but more internal, and how to figure that process out. And so as a board certified wellness coach, I really value what I call the 3 brains. And so that's the head, heart, and gut. And so for me, that is really about tapping into what's most important. There's a lot of studies on this idea of the gut intelligence and the brain intelligence and the heart intelligence. And so for me, I just really like to simplify it and make it easier. And so for me, really, the path to well-being really starts from within, allowing yourself to center yourself. There's a lot of tools out there in the world right now, from meditation to breathing exercises. But what I find really is helpful, and of the 1,500 interviews I've done so far, from thought leaders and experts, even celebrities like Venus Williams and Ice-T and Carson Kressley, is really wellness and well-being is really about how do you feel in your everyday that can allow you to use what you've learned and gleaned to just better yourself, your community, your life. And so I just really wanted to share today some fascinating interviews. So the agenda for today is really about me speaking about this topic and then bringing on 4 guests. So the first one is Peps Javier, and he's going to be talking about how to believe in yourself, which was one of my most popular interview series. Then I'll have Sterling Hawkins. He'll be talking about rising to resilience. Then I'll have Tim Sohn, and he'll be speaking about my interview series on I Survived Cancer, Here Is How I Did It. And lastly, I'll have Ben Curtis, and he's going to be talking about becoming free from the fear of failure. So I wanted to bring on Peps. Peps, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Peps. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So would you want to tell my audience a little bit about you?
Thank you so much. Well, my name is Peps, clearly. I am an artist, actor, dancer, and model by trade, and I'm also a life and career coach from the Dominican Republic.
Okay, wonderful, Peps. So you participated in the series on how to believe in yourself.
Mhm.
How did you forge this idea of belief in yourself? You mentioned a few accolades there, especially when it comes to the world of acting and performance. I imagine you have to have a really strong center, right, in order to do that. So can you share how you broke free from imposter syndrome in that area?
Oh my goodness. That's such a loaded question, but I think it's really a few things. I think one is reminding yourself of what it is that you're pursuing. So for me, I've known since I was like 4 or 5 that I wanted to be an entertainer. And there was a period where in my 20s, I hung around with a lot of people who didn't necessarily encourage those ideas or my talents or anything that I wanted to do. So when I realized that I wasn't believing in myself, I had to start really dissecting what was happening within me and around me. And I had internalized a lot of the criticism, a lot of the self-talk that was negative, a lot of the experiences like auditions that didn't go my way or jobs that didn't work out, and really working on the aspect of what am I here to do? What is my plan going forward? And then if I don't believe in myself right now, like I didn't then what can I start doing to start working on it? And I think it's one of those things where I think we live in the day and age of like really fast results, like microwavable results. But building confidence takes time, and like building the belief of knowing that it's possible for you to be successful takes a lot of work and effort. So going through the process day in and day out was probably the biggest thing that I would ever say allowed me to start really believing in myself.
Mm. And you know, in the article, you mentioned also this idea of having a community, whether that's a
Mhm.
community or a community within your own work environment. How did you forge that, and what steps could you give someone who's really wanting to venture into this arena but doesn't really have the support they need?
I think it's different for everybody, and also everybody needs to look at their resources and what's feasible. So for some people, like myself, who live in LA or at the time in New York, there's way more options and somewhere that's a little bit less commercial or less industry heavy. So depending as to where somebody is physically, that can really have a big impact. So certain things that people could look into could be virtual support groups or a virtual mentor versus going somewhere physically that may not be attainable to them. For me, what I would always encourage is to find a mentor, somebody who's gone ahead before, has gone ahead in that same area before they have. Typically, with a mentor, you would want somebody who's similar to you in a sense, but also can give you a different perspective, can give you that encouragement. It can also give you strategies. I think part of confidence and success is getting the right strategy for you and getting the right strategy that would allow you to go from point A to point B. So the first thing I would say is look at what's available to you around you, and then look at a mentor or a coach. And then from there, slowly start adding in different players, finding a new friend from either like a dance class or an acting class, finding somebody who's on a similar journey, but maybe it's a different career path. So for example, when I was in the early stages of my dance career, I loved hanging around with people who were launching businesses. Even though it's two completely different fields, I really enjoyed working and learning from people who were doing something for themselves. So even though it wasn't the same field, it was a similar mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, there was something I found very intriguing. You have this idea of assess, awareness, identify, implement, this practice of yours. Where did it originate and how do you practically use it? How can someone actually use those for their advantage in the day-to-day life?
Well, the origin of that in specific was because I used to be very, very broke. So I couldn't afford a coach right away. So I would always find things on YouTube or SoundCloud to listen to from Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Lisa Nichols, all these great coaches and personal development speakers. And I would study what they would tell me to do. I would study their audios, I would study their trainings. And because I couldn't hire somebody at that time, I would have to apply it for myself. So I kind of created this process from being broke that I've been utilizing for myself and for my clients. So that's really where it came from. But to break it down, and I think in the most simple way, it's really just getting to know yourself and really getting to give yourself the gift of time and self intimacy, the gift for you to dissect what you're thinking about, how you're acting, what it is that you're saying, what you're doing, what you're not doing, and then correlating it to what it is that you would like to do and accomplish. So one of the biggest things that I've seen from my clients a lot of times when they start working with me is that there's a level of awareness that they don't have in that moment. So we can't make progress, we can't improve, we can't change anything if we don't know who we are in that moment and where we're at. So always identifying and gaining that awareness of who you are and what it is that may be holding you back from point A is the most important step, at least for me.
Great. All right, wonderful. Well, before you go, is there one last tidbit that you can give to the audience viewers right now?
One last tidbit. I would say, ironically, that there's more time for us to do what we want to do. I think, yes, we can live with urgency and we should, but I've noticed that there's this sense of pressure in trying to get to the finish line tomorrow or yesterday. And even though, yes, we don't want to waste a moment, I think giving ourselves the ability to receive grace for ourselves and take our time. We're living in a world that's already difficult enough as it is. Why make it even that much more difficult? So giving ourselves the time and the patience to move forward in life.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Peps, thank you so much for that
Thank
thrilling
you.
article. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Savio. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Yep. I would like to bring on Sterling Hawkins. Sterling, you there?
I am. Hey, Savio. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you, Sterling. Yeah, absolutely. So, Sterling, would you like to just give our audience a little bit background information on you?
Sure. I'm a writer, speaker, and entrepreneur. But really what my focus is on is discomfort. My book's called Hunting Discomfort. And I think we're dealing, all of us, with more discomfort than ever before with, the economy and staffing issues in businesses and stress in our lives. And I think the way to free ourselves from that discomfort is getting to the source of it. So that's really what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I see all your social media posts of all your speaking engagements. I'm always so excited for you to get up on stage. It's really quite amazing, actually. It's really great.
It's
Absolutely.
A blast.
So
and I'll tell you what, as somebody that used to be terrified to speak in public, to be able to speak in front of these conferences and crowds it's mind-blowing, and I'm grateful and inspired every day.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for interviewing, taking part of the Rise into Resilience interview series with me. There was a lot of people who really were fascinated with that idea of resilience. I think it's a word that people just use just really very flippantly. What setback for yourself was the catalyst, like a stepping stone for you in rising above whatever problems you've had in your life?
Yeah. Well, I didn't come out of the womb hunting discomfort, almost the opposite. Long, dramatic, painful story short. I got fairly lucky early in my career, started a company which we sold to a group in Silicon Valley and became part of this rocket ship of a success where we raised hundreds of millions of dollars, multi-billion-dollar valuation, offices all over the world. For a while, it felt like I was living a scene out of Wolf of Wall Street until the housing market collapsed and our funding dried up. And when the company collapsed and went bankrupt, so did I. And it led to one of the darkest, hardest points I've ever experienced in my life. And it was kind of in that rock bottom, so to speak, that I started to look at discomfort not as something to avoid, deny, or just like buckle down and survive to get through, but literally as the source of where your next breakthrough can come from. It is the path forward.
Yeah, and this belief system of hunting discomfort, it's so unique. It's so and the antithesis of what we think, right? We should avoid discomfort. But what are 5 tenets that you profess or that you advise people in order to seek discomfort and use it in a very powerful way?
Yeah, well, I think important for us all to understand out of the gate is that when we're uncomfortable, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through your veins, when you're feeling those feelings, scientifically is proven that you're set to learn up to 4 times faster. It's not something to avoid. It's quite literally a biohack to be better, faster, and smarter. And there's really 5 key practices that I think best enable all of us to be able to do that. And the first is willing to look at an alternate reality. It's not that how you see yourself, others, or even the world is inaccurate, but it might not be the whole truth. So willing to look through a greater lens, how you're looking at yourself or any situation. The second piece is once you see something greater, commit to something greater. I call it get a tattoo, right? Not a real tattoo, but commit in a way where there's no going back. Then you need people on your side to help. You need what I call to build a streaking, surrounding yourself with people that fill a couple of different roles, but probably most importantly are going to be able to hold you accountable. When you're accountable, somebody on the outside holding you accountable, 95% more likely to achieve your goals. So we need that. The fourth component is flip it. Look at the problems, obstacles, limits as a pathway forward. They're not stopping points. It's a point to slow down, reflect, and look at it in new ways. And the fifth, and maybe most important, is surrender. Not give up, but accept things exactly as they are and exactly as they're not. And when we're able to do that, it frees us from all that knowledge and the emotional baggage of the past and enables us to move forward.
Is there a tidbit or a takeaway that you could give the audience who are dealing or grappling with something that's really hard in their life, that the first thing they should do?
Well, in the low point that I had in my own life, this thing my mom said came back to me. And it's something that's become central to my life and I think can help everybody on here, which is the way out is through the problems, the challenges, the pain, the grief, the anger, the embarrassment. The way out is through those things. And when we let ourselves feel those deeper feelings, and we do it no matter what, I think that is what enables us to move beyond those really challenging circumstances.
Really powerful, Sterling. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I'll speak to you soon.
I'll look forward to it. Thanks, Savio.
Great. Yep. So I don't know if Tim's around or not, but I'll just wait for him to come on by. He's going to be speaking about one of an interview series that I did that's really dear to my heart, which is called I Survived Cancer and Here's How I Did It. I can just speak from my own journey in the cancer survival journey. It was a very tough thing to go through. Obviously, cancer is, but also coming to terms with how I'm seen by other people. Right? Now I have this label that I'm a cancer survivor. I'm happy that I am one, but it comes with all these pressures, and you get yourself and you see friends and family members who have cancer who are just not here. And then you have your scans and have anxiety. So that's another sort of obstacle that you have to overcome. Then the third one is really this idea of, like, what am I doing after this? Like, well, why am I here? And what's the purpose of it all? And so for me, I made a mission of mine to amplify the voices of cancer survivors and have them share their stories, because I think it's very important for stories to be shared. And that's why Medium is such a great platform, because it allows you to really see the struggles and the triumphs of those who have overcome, who have faced cold mountains in their life, and who have seen themselves, seen themselves in very sort of odd ways. I often say my cancer was a blood cancer, so my scars are invisible. But when I've interviewed, at this point, 200 cancer survivors, they've lost their breasts, they've lost their colon, they've lost the throat, they've lost their various organs, and they can't pretend it's not there. That scar is very visible, and it's something that they have to come to terms with and live with. And so my questions for Tim, and because Tim is not available at this moment, is really, how do you take this idea of something that happened to you externally, like cancer, and come to terms with it in a very appropriate way that allows you to live life in a very natural and organic way? So my question for him was really about, how do you reconnect with nature during your cancer journey? I think nature teaches us. I took a trip. I did in coverage in Italy, and I did a forest bathing. It was my first time doing it. And on that trip, the woman says, nature doesn't need us, we need nature. And it was like a light bulb moment for me, because it really allowed me to see that nature holds within its own process, its own power. And I think the more we connect with it, the more we're able to sustain ourselves or get ourselves to where we need to go. Second question I had for Tim was really this idea of, how do you stay resilient during your cancer battle in general? Like, how does that work? And Sterling mentioned this idea of hunting discomfort, but when you have a whole care team, I had 19 doctors in and around me, tending to me, which I'm very grateful. And then on my off cycles, I did maybe 10 or 12 different integrated modalities. For me, I found that the middle way was the best way for my healing journey. And for me, the idea of resilience and healing doesn't always occur in a doctor's office, doesn't always occur, with this idea of like toughening through. sometimes it's in those subtle moments. It's like when we're sleeping, it's when we're relaxing, it's when we are sleeping, that allows us to feel more connected with ourselves and allows us to feel that we can overcome, or that we can find ways to overcome. And so I think that's just a very important thing to mention in general, is this idea that you have to keep moving forward in order to find that rainbow on the other side, or find that glimmer of hope on the other side. And so for me, it's just, my cancer journey was really about that. And I wrote a best-selling book on it. At this point, I mentioned I interviewed 200 cancer survivors, and of that, I told 35 of their stories, including my own. It became a bestseller, which I was happy. But for me, it wasn't about the bestseller status. It was really about the fact that the idea of hope translated. And my endeavors at this point is really to put a light on that process and that journey. So I'm endeavoring to do a TEDx talk. I'm supposed to do one in October. So I have about 54 days left in order to get my TED talk off the ground. So I'm really sort of pleased and happy about the fact that I sort of reached that pivot in my life. My next guest was supposed to be Ben Curtis, but I don't see any questions or I don't see him listed here. So I'll just speak a little briefly about. So I've interviewed Ben for this interview series on becoming free from the fear of failure, and it really stemmed. I pitched the idea to my editor. It really stemmed from the idea of, we're always thinking that we have to win, but failure itself teaches us something. And and it could be, failure could be something as small as like not getting that job, or it could be as big as, your cancer is in remission, right? That's the feeling of it is failure. It's not really failure, but the feeling of it is failure. And so, in my interview with Ben, he's a actor, he's a performance actor, he's a coach. And for him, it's really the turning point for his fear of failure was he was the Dell guy. So back then in the 90s, like the Dell guy, like, hey dude, get yourself a Dell. He was that guy. And he went through the horrors of Maryland. He was being in and around that area. And so for him, he really sort of saw himself in a different way. He sort of had medical issues and PTSD and all those things. And so he was able to sort of overcome that and find ways to enrich his life by all the hurdles and obstacles that he went through. A practical tip that I was going to ask him to share in his perspective on failure is what he really, professes, which is that this idea of men's work. It's this idea that men have to rise in the age of the Me Too movement, that men have to cultivate and grow and have to be more in touch with their emotions and with feeling senses, rather than this aggressive, masculine, toxic type of energy. And he does great work when he leads men on retreats. He does ID Lives. He does events and seminars, and so it's a shame that he didn't sort of pop on today. I guess there've been some technical issues, but in any event, that's pretty much the gist of my interview series with those individuals. And I really saw this idea of how I wanted to do the interview series with cancer, doctors, this idea of resilience, fear of failure, this idea of becoming free of anything that sort of limits you in your life. And so for me, I really take this job and take this work very, very seriously. And one of the things that I really teach is this idea of I mentioned earlier about using the head, heart, and gut. And really, you could do it using breath, you can do it in meditation, but it's the idea that those sacred spaces within us resonate some type of energy and some type of consciousness. And there's some studies on them, but they're not completely validated, but they themselves have some level of knowing or intelligence. And I think the way you should do it or can do it, or perhaps you want to try, is this idea of breathing into the different body parts. So it's a very simple practice. People try to complicate it in different various modalities, but it's really just breathing into the head, breathing to the eyes, taking a breath into the throat, and seeing where those areas of your life resonate some type of feeling, sensation, color, some image, something's not. And that is really maybe an invitation to tap into that area that might feel disconnected from self. And so a large part of my work is really sort of allowing cancer survivors to see themselves as more than their illness or more than their victory to some degree, to see themselves as another another person in the world who's generating positive energy and thoughts for what they've been through, what they've garnered, what they've had to endure. And so for me, the work is very important because it really allows me to see that as we connect with our inner selves, our well-being becomes heightened. Because I think the worst thing we do to ourselves is to neglect the things that are bothering us. So my cancer at the time, people often say to me, you must have lived a very unhealthy lifestyle. And really on all accounts, I probably lived a very healthy one. I was working out 5 days a week. I ate organic foods. I lived a very holistic life. I saw a naturopath for 10 years who gave me vitamin structure. But I will say my emotional area in my life was just not positive. There was not anything that was positive about it. I was in a business relationship with a bunch of other people. I didn't have the voice or the strength or the courage really to voice what was happening in my life. And so for me, I really saw myself as there was a lot of shame attached to my cancer. I'm not saying that was the reason for my cancer, but in retrospect, not about 8.5 years ago, I would say that a large part of was the fact that I wasn't really in touch with my inner self. I was in touch with everything that the world told me I needed to do, but not with what was going on with my body and my senses. And so I just invite you all, if anyone has any questions at all, I just invite you all really to just take the time to get to know self a little better. And that's just as easy as just sitting in contemplation or sitting quietly for a couple of minutes a day and allowing yourself to just feel what you're feeling and sense what you're sensing. Oh, I see Ben right here. Ben, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. I've been here the whole time, and it only just gave me an option to join just now.
Okay. All right. Okay. I apologize for that. That's the world of running a large scale event. But anyway, I'll make it quick.
Right.
So I did go into my own idea of fear of failure, but what was your turning point in overcoming fear of failure?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I was the Dell computer dude. I had a huge $1 million contract as the face of Dell Computers, and I got arrested for cannabis in 2003, which ended all of that. It ended my acting career. It ended my contract with Dell, and it really created a lot of judgment. And also people were wondering why I wasn't getting more work, especially people who didn't have any problem with cannabis at the time. And so I think the biggest thing was not shaming myself. I took on a lot of shame. Like I was the reason that Dell or my career was over. But really, I just made a human error, and I was in the process of learning as a young person in college. And I was at the peak of my career, and I've continued to get better and better and better. So I think it's really about, no matter what the world hears or puts on you about failure, that failure is actually one of the most important things that you can do in life, because it's through failing that we learn. And if you're not failing, then you're not trying. And so I believe it's really about embracing failure and saying, what can I learn from this? Not how can I beat myself up or where was I bad or wrong, but what can I put in place now that might actually give me more strength? Or maybe I can help someone else who's been through a similar thing now, and I can provide experience and wisdom just because I've come out on the other side.
I love that. Do you have a practical tip in the last minute or so that we have about how you can shift that perspective of failure into one of, I'm not even going to call it success, one of power, of empowerment?
Yeah, make a list of all the places, write down everywhere you think you failed in your life, and then sit down with your best friend and have them look at it and tell you what they think. I think that's a really
Oh, I
quick
love
place to do it. Share the next time you fail and you feel like you're a failure. Ask someone in your life who really loves you, the empowered listeners in your life. I'm feeling like a failure. What do you see? Right. So consider that, again, if you're failing, that you're taking action, and to look at your mindset. What am I making up about myself in this moment? And what gift have I been given inside of this failure?
I love that, Ben. Well, thank you so much. I know we had a truncated time here, but
we had a failure in performance. We did not fail as humans. We only had technical breakdowns.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's
absolutely 100%.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And everyone, you can check out my articles in Authority Magazine, which is Medium's largest publication, by searching my name, Savio P. Clemente. Thank you, everyone, for being a guest. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.